Rejection happens to all of us, and it can be a disappointing experience. I will now give you some advice for young researchers. Many things have changed today, which can be a troubling issue. The chance of getting paper published is becoming smaller and smaller. Although it never is easy to take, rejection is particularly hard at the beginning of your career. But rejections will lead to a better result and will be good for the career path. Use this feedback to improve your paper for submission to another journal, as well as your next, more robust study of the topic. Using several individuals with expertise in the topic have donated substantial time to provide detailed advice to advance your paper and future work. Also, remember that publication does not mean funding. Investors will learn how to attract and engage young researchers at the same time.
The question today of, what makes a luxury brand and how do we distinguish it is very hard to answer. The standard business response is to say they are more exclusive. And we get exclusivity by having high price and relatively small amounts of the product available. The reality, however, of luxury brands is they're sold in their millions. And in some cases are not priced that much higher than the standard output. The only way I can really answer your question is to say it's all relative. As you said in your introduction, it wasn't that long ago in Australia that we would have considered 2 televisions to be a luxury, or even further back, 1 color television. And you can make a strong argument, for example, that Starbucks in China right now is a luxury purchase because of its cost, because of how frequently it's purchased by many people. So I think the long answer is a complicated one, but the answer is it depends who you talk to. I think in the business community, what we would say is there are a small cluster of more expensive brands which have a distinct strategy that we would identify as being luxury brands. And they start with the Rolls-Royces and the Tiffany's and the Louis Vuittons of the world. And I think that tends to be how we see them.
Today, this course you're going to take is about what is engineering and how to work with a complicated system. You guys should know the answers because all of you guys are from the engineering course, especially when you design, build, debug, and develop something new during these processes. You are working with the complicated system. So how to program complicated systems, and how would you know it actually works before producing it? Sometimes the inspirations are from your daily life. You probably need to consider your personal life experience. And from the common everyday life to the tiny things that you cannot see virtually, and the inspirations normally exist in the tiny levels. A complicated system such as your laptops running Microsoft systems. That means the system is not able to see, which means you guys have to virtualize it. Engineering is here to help virtualize by using systems. Nowadays, the complicated systems are relatively reliable, and you guys work upon these and need to deliver the new outcomes which are reliable as well. This is what we do now, and we are good at it. Engineering is to help virtualize by using systems. In order to develop and produce a reliable system, you need to consider more on the risks, potentials, predictability, and accuracy. The ocean provides habitat for 98% fish, the source of protein feeding 4.8 billion people. But human activities and climate change have left corals bleached in some oceans. There are many species of fish that are endangered. The government set up a network called PTE-A Marine Campaign, in which countries and organizations have been collaborating with each other to protect the environment for 32 years. A marine protected area, an MPA, is a zone designated and managed to protect marine habitats and species for the good of the ocean, society, economy, and culture. Within MPAs, human activities such as fishing, vessel traffic, and tourism are regulated. MPAs can come in the form of a fully protected marine reserve, a moderately protected marine park, or a no-take zone, among others. But MPA is faced with lots of challenges, as some developing countries lack management and resources and feel excluded.
A leader can define or clarify goals by issuing a memo or an executive order, an edict, or a fatwa or a tweet, by passing a law, barking a command, or presenting an interesting idea in a meeting of colleagues. Leaders can mobilize people's energies in ways that range from subtle, quiet persuasion to the coercive threat or the use of deadly force. Sometimes a charismatic leader such as Martin Luther King Jr. can define goals and mobilize energies through rhetoric and the power of example. We can think of leadership as a spectrum in terms of both visibility and the power the leader wields. On one end of the spectrum, we have the most visible, authoritative leaders like the President of the United States, or the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, or a dictator such as Hitler or Gaddafi. At the opposite end of the spectrum is casual, low-key leadership found in countless situations every day around the world, leadership that can make a significant difference to the individuals whose lives are touched by it. Over the centuries, the first kind, the out-in-front, authoritative leadership, has generally been exhibited by men. Some men in positions of great authority, including Nelson Mandela, have chosen a strategy of leading from behind. More often, however, top leaders have been quite visible in their exercise of power. Women, as well as some men, have provided casual, low-key leadership behind the scenes. But this pattern has been changing as more women have taken up opportunities for visible, authoritative leadership.
The United States is considered the biggest food-wasting country in the world. Consumers collectively throw away more than all the retailers together in the U.S. In total, private U.S. households waste around 43% of all food. According to Save the Food, a national public service campaign, this could translate into an annual financial loss of $1,500 for a family of 4. In fact, over 40 million tons of food ends up in landfills every year, worth more than $161 billion. 60% of food waste comes from general consumption. There are 2 main sources of food waste. The majority of food waste comes from supermarkets, especially in the used-by section. The other factor is what people purchase and how they eat. So purchasing all items is not a good idea. Avoiding food waste efficiently along the supply chain and in all our households can result in a win-win scenario. Halving food waste could help meet the demand for nutrition of our growing population and equally minimize the negative environmental effects of agriculture. Today, poems remain an important part of art and culture. We often talk about the knowledge about the literature in poem. Poetry is probably the oldest form of literature and probably predates the origin of writing itself. The oldest written manuscripts we have are poems, mostly epic poems telling the stories of ancient mythology. The English language in poems and poetries is difficult to understand, often giving readers a feeling of frustration and making it hard for readers to enjoy poetry. This is because poems use literary expressions. Poetry was once written according to fairly strict rules of meter and rhyme, and each culture had its own rules. Some poems incorporate rhyme schemes with 2 or more lines that end in like-sounding words. We should learn to simply enjoy it and to know more about literature knowledge. Social skills are vital in enabling an individual to have and maintain positive interactions with others. Many of these skills are crucial in making and sustaining friendships. Social interactions do not always run smoothly, and an individual needs to be able to implement appropriate strategies, such as conflict resolution, when difficulties in interactions arise. It is also important for individuals to have empathy, as it allows them to respond to an understanding and caring way to how others are feeling. Children are facing social difficulties with particular risks. Young people who do not have strong relationships with the adults in their family are at even more risk. An experiment in high school, which lasted for 8 to 12 weeks, the students were told to be a movie director and to choose their own story structure. The students worked with each other, which involved lots of different skills and social interactivity. The movies they had made were actually cool. Then, the researchers tested the intervention effect, finding this can improve their self-regulation, and they found this can improve their self-regulation and critical thinking skills.
Honeybees do a waggle dance to direct other bees to sources of nectar. But dancing bees like this one can be halted by a headbutt from another bee. Now researchers have found that this headbutt is actually a warning signal. A feeding station was set up in the lab to mimic a source of nectar. Then foraging bees were introduced to dangers at the station, such as competition from rival colonies. When foragers returned to the hive, they stopped bees dancing. Scientists think the behavior warns dancers of a dangerous source of nectar.
This is a new memory learning memory. It is a good thing for you to get enough sleep, and a bad thing for you if not. People need to sleep before learning, and people also need to sleep after learning. When you are asleep, the memory can consolidate all the information into your brain. From this point, it may only get worse. Not only will I tell you about the wonderfully good things that happen when you get to sleep, but the alarmingly bad things that happen when you don't get enough, both for your brain and for your body. Let me start with the brain and the functions of learning and memory, because what we've discovered over the past 10 years or so is that you need sleep after learning to essentially hit the save button on those new memories so that you don't forget. But recently, we discovered that you also need to sleep before learning, and now to actually prepare your brain almost like a dry sponge, ready to initially soak up new information. And without sleep, the memory circuits of the brain essentially become waterlogged, as it were, and you can't absorb new memories.
I suppose you wouldn't expect perhaps to find a mathematician in a museum of historical objects, but actually the objects that I've been drawn to in this museum have quite a lot of mathematical significance. These Neolithic stones discovered in Scotland, dating back 5,000 years, are probably the first examples of humans exploring the concept of symmetry. And that's what I do as a practicing mathematician. I spend my life trying to understand what symmetries are possible in nature and in mathematics and abstractly. And here, I've got a connection going back 5,000 years to people who are already trying to understand, how can I arrange patches on the side of these stone balls in a symmetrical manner? One of the intriguing things about these stones is that we don't actually know what they're for. They might have been for divination, trying to predict the future. They might have been part of a game. They look very much like dice, but we don't really think there's any game associated with them. Maybe they were just for chucking around. They're very nice in the hand when you hold them. Or maybe they were symbols of power in the clan. I suppose that's why I like them, because we don't really know what they are.
Because of the economic model, the newspaper industry has been shrinking drastically from the last 50 years of the 20th century in some states of America. Also, as the economic model changed, newspapers increased the cash flow. However, there are still some newspaper industries losing money because of a decrease in advertising and buyers. They can't find buyers. Only a few newspapers have positive cash flow. Over 100 newspapers with cash flow in red have had no money to publish the newspaper every day. Some of them published 3 days per week. Small-sized newspapers only published once a week and had to go online. Some newspapers even disappeared. The staff working in the newspaper industry decreased by 30 to 60% or more.
I hope I needn't elaborate too much why I think it is that population matters in the world. These are the kind of topics which are normally cited when thinking about population, its challenges, its problems, its opportunities. It's not all problems, after all. Pressure on resources, a very obvious point when world population has reached now 7 billion and is increasing by 70 or 80 million people per year. A diminishing number, of course, but nonetheless, it's still quite a challenge, particularly when global population is almost certain to add another 3 billion to that 6 billion, with all kinds of questions as to the adequacy of resources, water particularly, in global climate change, but also food and other aspects of resources later on. Problems of security, because this growth will not be equally distributed between different parts of the world. Some parts of the world will grow, other parts of the world will shrink. The balance of power, therefore, will correspondingly change for demographic reasons, as we will see. Urban growth is remarkable. We already have megacities of 20 million people. These are going to grow even further in due course, and one wonders just how far they can grow before certain aspects of the infrastructure start breaking down.
We have a long history to research on hospital design and patient recovery. A long time ago, people began to study therapeutic environments. For example, in 1855, Florence Nightingale recognized that color and form enhanced a patient's recovery. They found that fresh air and sunlight had positive impacts, and architecture also played an important part. Views of the hospital's backyards can help patients rest well and sleep fast, and can also help relieve their stress and pain easily because of the pleasant feelings caused by nature. Being visited by friends or family members can help patients be better off sooner, as well as living alone in a single room. 90% of patients and nurses in hospitals agree that well-designed hospital environment links to recovery rates.
We are from an organization called Non-Human Rights Project, and we fight for legal rights of non-human animals. Drawing a line in order to enslave an autonomous and self-determining being is a violation of equality. We then searched through 80 jurisdictions. We chose the state of New York. Then we decided upon who our plaintiffs are going to be. We decided upon chimpanzees. We know the extraordinary cognitive capabilities that they have, and they also resemble the kind that human beings have. And so we chose chimpanzees, and we began to then canvass the world to find the experts in the chimpanzee cognition. So now we need to find our chimpanzees. Our chimpanzee, first we found 2 of them in the state of New York. Both of them would die before we could even get our suits filed. Then we found Tommy. Tommy is a chimpanzee. Tommy was a chimpanzee. We found him in that cage. We found him in a small room that was filled with cages in a larger warehouse structure on a used trailer lot in central New York. And so on the last day of the week, December 2013, the Non-Human Rights Project filed 3 suits all across the state of New York, using the same common law argument. The court didn't approve our appeal because they think chimpanzees are not humans, even though they have cognitive skills. We proved to the court that chimpanzees also have cognitive capabilities, and that they were not hearing us. Humans are faced with many challenges, one of which is climate change. An experiment was conducted on the environment and climate in the 1930s when people first noticed climate change. Humans have been trying to change their lifestyles to deal with it, but the observation of climate change is difficult from area to area. A method is introduced to help understand the mechanism of the climate system. Researchers predict the temperature will increase by about 2 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. What's less certain is what rising temperatures mean for the planet. Some climate models predict subtle changes. Others forecast rising sea levels, which could flood coastal areas around the world. Weather patterns could change, making hurricanes more frequent. Severe droughts could become more common in warm areas. And species unable to adapt to the changing conditions would face extinction, although much remains to be learned about global warming. Many organizations advocate cutting greenhouse gas emissions to reduce the impact of global warming. Consumers can help by saving energy around the house, switching to compact fluorescent light bulbs, and driving fewer miles in the car each week. These simple changes may help the Earth cooler in the future. An essay is a chance to identify your read and learned. As a writer, you first need to collect many materials, then write an essay in 4 or 5 paragraphs, structures, and quotes. If someone is searching for a book or article to read, he or she will decide from the very beginning whether this work is worth attention. If you want to wow your teacher, polish the introduction, especially the first couple of sentences. Add an essay hook, something interesting, funny, shocking, or intriguing to win the reader's attention. Build an emotional connection with your reader right from the start. A hook in the essay is a catchy sentence or paragraph in the impressive introduction, which serves as an attention element and an important part. An excellent hook sentence is engaging and interesting. It is a perfect method to start an argumentative or persuasive essay. The hook for your essay often appears in the first sentence. The opening paragraph includes a thesis sentence. Some popular hook choices can include using an interesting quote, a little-known fact, famous last words, or a statistic.
Around the world, renewable energy use is on the rise. And these alternative energy sources could hold the key to combating climate change. What is renewable energy? Renewable energy is generated from sources that naturally replenish themselves and never run out. The most common sources are solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and biomass. Over 80% of the total energy consumed by humans is derived from fossil fuels. However, renewables are the fastest growing source of energy in the world. Renewable energy has many benefits. First, it can combat climate change because it creates no direct greenhouse gas emissions. The only emissions that they produce are indirect, meaning those that result from manufacturing parts, installation, operation, and maintenance. But even those are minimal.
Qualities of history and journalism are similar. They both need the determination to look for all available sources, and for them too, it's suggested to look inside the evidence and into how to collect evidence. A historian and a journalist both need universal sympathy for all sides of the story, and both need detailed attention to logic and literary style. The rules to determine their qualities conclude crucial factors, which means the article should be vivid, interesting, and have a clear writing style. These factors are also crucial for academic and journal papers. All these qualities contribute to a good journal paper. Hence, there is no clear line between them. In recent decades, journalism has been faced with challenges. So what happened to journalism? The rise of the internet has a great impact on journalism, specifically the ways it is produced and consumed. Because the internet democratizes people, ordinary people can get involved in journalism. It takes steps for people to feel enthusiastic about the changes in journalism. The internet not only speeds up spread of news, but also helps people gain information in various ways. Thus, journalism now becomes a collaborative process in an imaginary way, which is unexpected. For example, even small pieces of ordinary video can be a new type of journalism.
For many, these have been vital considerations for the future of artificial intelligence. But British computer scientist Alan Turing decided to disregard all these questions in favor of a much simpler one. Can a computer talk like a human? This question led to an idea for measuring artificial intelligence that would famously come to be known as the Turing test. In the 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, Turing proposed the following game. A human judge has a text conversation with unseen players and evaluates their responses. To pass the test, a computer must be able to replace one of the players without substantially changing the results. In other words, a computer would be considered intelligent if its conversation couldn't be easily distinguished from a human's. Turing predicted that by the year 2000, machines with 100 megabytes of memory would be able to easily pass his test. But he may have jumped the gun.
Fish are important because they help maintain the health of marine ecosystems and provide support to other marine life. They are an important part of the food web because they are predators to smaller organisms and prey to marine mammals and seabirds. Globally, they also support humans. About 80 million tons of fish are harvested annually. This volume is enough to feed all Filipinos with their annual fish consumption for 20 years. And there are currently about 60 million people working in the fishing industry globally. But on a global scale, 33% of fisheries are overfished, meaning too many fish are being harvested. This may cause fish populations to become depleted and not able to recover. 67% are fully exploited, meaning additional fishing effort could lead to the fisheries collapse. Only 10% have room to grow. With just 10% of the fisheries having room to grow, we might experience a global fishing crisis.
In The Origin of Species, Darwin provided abundant evidence that life on Earth has evolved over time, and he proposed natural selection as the primary mechanism for that change. He observed that individuals differ in their inherited traits, and that selection acts on such differences, leading to evolutionary change. Although Darwin realized that variation in heritable traits is a prerequisite for evolution, he did not know precisely how organisms pass heritable traits to their offspring. Just a few years after Darwin published The Origin of Species, Gregor Mendel wrote a groundbreaking paper on inheritance in pea plants. In that paper, Mendel proposed a model of inheritance in which organisms transmit discrete heritable units, now called genes, to their offspring. Although Darwin did not know about genes, Mendel's paper set a stage for understanding the genetic differences on which evolution is based.
I want today to talk about the Industrial Revolution from a variety of aspects. I put everything on the board I put on our website, so don't worry about copying it down, and it's all pretty obvious. So doing the Industrial Revolution across the century is no easy task, but we will do it and do the reading. Let me just say that the way people look at what used to be called the Industrial Revolution, and I guess some people still call it that, has changed dramatically. Through the 1950s and into the 1960s, the idea of the Industrial Revolution was that it was the work of some geniusy inventors who created machines used primarily in the textile industry, but also in mining, that eliminated blocks to assembly line production, and then everybody was crowded into factories, and the new brave world opened up. In fact, one of the most interesting books and sort of great classics that's still in print was written by an economic historian at Harvard who's still around, called David Landis, a good book called The Unbound Prometheus, which was basically that. And some of the inventions that I briefly describe in your reading, the spinning jenny, etc., refer to that. Well, and then that kind of analysis led one to concentrate on England, where the Industrial Revolution began, and to view industrialization as being a situation of sort of winners and losers by not going as fast. In your reading, I give you some pretty obvious examples of reasons for the Industrial Revolution first coming to England. Location of resources, particularly coal, a country in which there's nowhere that's more than 75 miles away from the sea, precocious canals and roads, banking system, fluidity between classes, a very large and increasingly larger proletariat, agricultural revolution, etc. And with that kind of analysis, those places that didn't industrialize as fast, for example, France, one thought, well, that they were quote-unquote retarded, a word that was used, unfortunately, at that time, and then one tried to see why not. Now, that analysis has been really rejected greatly over the past years because Industrial Revolution is measured by more than simply large factories with industrial workers and the number of machines. And the more, and this is the point of the beginning of this, the more that we look at the Industrial Revolution, the more that we see that the Industrial Revolution was first and foremost an intensification of forms of production, of kinds of production that were already there. And thus we spend more time looking at the intensification of artisanal production, craft production, of domestic industry, which we've already mentioned, that is people, mostly women, but also men and children too, working in the countryside,